The quantum whisper. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cold metal wall of Research Station Prometheus 7 and felt the gentle vibration of the quantum processors humming deep within the structure. 3 years into her assignment at this remote outpost, she had grown to love the rhythm of the machines and the endless silence of deep space beyond the station's shields. The morning shift had started like any other. Elena sat at her workstation in the communications lab, monitoring quantum frequencies from distant galaxies. Her job was to search for patterns in the cosmic background radiation, hoping to find evidence of intelligent life. Most days brought nothing but random noise and the occasional pulsar signal. Captain Marcus Chen entered the lab carrying 2 cups of coffee. He was a tall man with graying temples and kind eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures between human colonies. "Any interesting signals today, Elena?" he asked, setting 1 cup beside her keyboard. Elena shook her head and took a grateful sip of the hot coffee. "Just the usual cosmic chatter. Though I've been tracking a persistent anomaly from the direction of Andromeda, it's probably nothing, but the pattern keeps repeating every 47 minutes. Chen leaned over her shoulder to look at the display. Waves of data scrolled across multiple screens, showing frequency analyses and pattern recognition algorithms. "Show me," he said. Elena pulled up the data from the past week. A faint signal appeared as a barely visible spike among the background noise. "It's incredibly weak," she explained. "Whatever is sending this signal must be using enormous amounts of energy, but it's coming from so far away that only our most sensitive equipment can detect it." Lieutenant Sarah Okafor walked into the lab at that moment. She was a compact woman with sharp eyes and the confident bearing of someone who had survived combat on 3 different worlds. As the station's security chief, she made it her business to know about anything unusual. "What's got you 2 looking so serious?" she asked. Chen pointed at the display. "Elena's found something strange from Andromeda. A repeating signal." Sarah studied the data with the tactical mind of a former Marine. "Could be a distress call," she said. "Or a trap. We've seen both before." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She had been thinking the same thing but hadn't wanted to voice it. "The thing is," she said slowly, "this signal is using quantum entanglement frequencies. That's incredibly advanced technology. Most civilizations don't develop quantum communication until they've been spacefaring for thousands of years." Engineer Dmitry Petrov chose that moment to burst through the lab doors, his usually calm demeanor replaced by visible excitement. Dmitry was a stocky man with brilliant hands and a mind that understood quantum mechanics the way poets understood words. "Elena, you need to see this," he said breathlessly. "I was running diagnostics on the quantum array when I noticed something. That signal you've been tracking, it's not just a signal, it's a carrier wave." Elena's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. A carrier wave meant the signal was designed to carry information, not just announce presence. "Show me," she said already, moving toward the quantum analysis station. Dimitri's fingers danced over the controls, and the display changed. Instead of simple wave patterns, complex mathematical structures appeared on the screen. "Look at this," he said, highlighting sections of the data. "These aren't random patterns. They're linguistic structures. Someone is trying to communicate." The 4 humans stared at the screen in silence. After decades of searching for intelligent, alien life, they might be looking at the first confirmed message from another civilization. Captain Chen made the decision that would change everything. "Elena, I want you to work with Dmitry to decode this message. Sarah, increase security protocols but keep it quiet. I'm going to contact Fleet Command and let them know what we've found." Over the next 18 hours, Elena and Dmitry worked without sleep. They fed the alien signal through every linguistic analysis program the station possessed. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. The signal contained mathematical concepts that translated across species boundaries, followed by increasingly complex linguistic structures. Elena's breakthrough came at 3 in the morning, station time. She was staring at a sequence of symbols that had been driving her crazy for hours when suddenly they clicked into place. "Dimitri," she whispered, "I think this is a pronoun. They're referring to themselves." From that point, the translation accelerated. The alien language was incredibly sophisticated, with concepts that human languages could barely express. But the mathematical foundation made it possible to understand the basic meaning. The message that emerged was both wonderful and terrifying. Greetings to the young minds who hear our quantum echo. We are the Cathara, children of the spiral galaxy you call Andromeda. For 3,000 rotations of our home stars, we have been trapped in a dimensional prison, calling out across the void for someone with the technology to hear our plea. Elena's hands shook as she read the translation aloud to the others. Captain Chen had returned from his communication with Fleet Command, and all 4 humans listened in amazement as the alien message continued. We were once a proud civilization, builders of crystal cities and gardens among the stars. Our technology allowed us to shape matter at the quantum level and to step between dimensions as easily as you might walk between rooms. But our peaceful nature became our weakness when the Devourers came. Sarah interrupted the reading. Devourers? That doesn't sound good, Elena continued. The Devourers are entities from the spaces between realities. They consume all matter and energy they encounter, growing stronger with each world they destroy. When they reached our galaxy, we tried to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. We failed to understand that they cannot be reasoned with. They exist only to consume. The message described a desperate war in which the Catharas advanced, but peaceful civilization fought against an enemy that grew stronger with every victory. Unable to match the Devourer's aggression, the Cathara had made a final, desperate gambit. Our greatest minds created a dimensional barrier, sealing ourselves away from normal space. We hoped to wait until the Devourers moved on to other galaxies, but we have learned that our prison is also a trap. The barriers are weakening, and when they fall, the Devourers will break free into your universe. Dimitri looked up from the quantum displays with growing alarm. Elena, look at these energy readings. The signal is getting stronger. Elena checked her instruments and felt her blood turn cold. The message is updating in real time. They're still alive, still sending this signal. The updated message contained coordinates and a desperate plea. The barriers will fail within your measurement of days. The Devourers have grown beyond our ability to contain them. If they escape into normal space, they will consume galaxy after galaxy until nothing remains. We beg you, young minds who hear our call, if you possess the courage that our peaceful nature lacks, come to these coordinates. Perhaps together, we can find a solution that neither of our civilizations could discover alone. Captain Chen stood quietly for a long moment, processing the implications. Finally, he spoke. Sarah, send an encrypted message to Admiral Torres at Fleet Command. Tell her we need the fastest response fleet they can assemble. Include Elena's translation and Dimitri's technical analysis. Sarah nodded and headed for the communications array. As she left, Chen turned to Elena and Dimitri. How long do we have? Elena checked the quantum timestamp on the message. Based on the signal propagation time and the Cathara's description of the barrier degradation, maybe 72 hours before the barriers fail completely. And how long would it take our fastest ships to reach those coordinates? Dimitri ran quick calculations. Using the new quantum drives, about 60 hours if they push the engines to maximum. Chen felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. Humanity had been spacefaring for less than 3 centuries. They had encountered other alien civilizations, but none as advanced as the Cathara appeared to be, and none facing a threat that could potentially destroy all life in the universe. But Chen had fought in the border wars against the aggressive Thrak Empire. He had seen what humans could accomplish when they combined their natural adaptability with their willingness to take risks that other species considered insane. The Cathara called themselves peaceful, but they had also called humans young minds, not primitive or inferior, but young. Perhaps that youth was exactly what this situation required. Elena interrupted his thoughts. "Captain, there's something else. The message includes technical specifications for quantum tunneling between dimensions. The Cathara are sharing their most advanced technology with us." Chen looked at the alien equations filling Elena's screens. Technology that could revolutionize human science, freely given by a civilization facing extinction. The Cathara weren't just asking for help. They were showing trust in a species they had never met. 12 hours later, Admiral Rebecca Torres's response came through the quantum communicator. Fleet Command was assembling every available ship for a rescue mission that might determine the fate of all intelligent life. The message was simple: hold position, fleet departing in 18 hours, prepare full technical briefing for dimensional travel. As Elena watched the stars through the observation deck windows, she thought about the Cathara trapped in their dimensional prison, sending their quantum plea across impossible distances. A peaceful civilization that had run out of options, reaching out to a young and aggressive species they had never met. In less than 3 days, humanity would either save an ancient alien civilization or die trying. For the first time in her career studying alien communications, Elena realized that the most important message wasn't the one they had received. It was the one they were about to send back. The Dimensional Gateway Admiral Rebecca Torres stood on the bridge of the battleship Resolute, watching the assembled fleet take formation around her flagship. 37 ships had answered the emergency call, from massive dreadnoughts to sleek reconnaissance vessels. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled for a single mission. Torres was a woman who had earned her rank through 40 years of military service, including the Bloody Centauri campaign and the diplomatic crisis on Kepler 442b. Her silver hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dark eyes missed nothing as she surveyed the tactical displays. This mission was unlike anything she had faced before. Dr. James Wright, the fleet's chief dimensional physicist, approached her station carrying a tablet loaded with calculations. Wright was younger than most of the senior staff, brilliant but nervous, with the pale complexion of someone who spent more time with equations than with people. "Admiral, we finished analyzing the Cathara technical data, the dimensional coordinates. They provided will take us to a region of space where reality itself is unstable." Torres nodded grimly. "Explain it in terms a soldier can understand, Doctor." Wright activated his tablet, showing a 3-dimensional model of twisted space-time. "Imagine normal space as a flat sheet of paper. The Cathara have been trapped in a pocket that exists between the sheet and a parallel layer. The barriers keeping this pocket stable are failing, which means sections of space are becoming unpredictable. Ships could find themselves in normal space one moment and somewhere else entirely the next." Commander Lisa Park, captain of the assault ship Vanguard, joined the conversation. Park was compact and athletic, with short-cropped red hair and the quick reflexes of someone who had survived more zero-gravity combat operations than anyone else in the fleet. "What about our ships? Can we handle dimensional travel?" Chief Engineer Alex Rodriguez answered from his position at the engineering station. Rodriguez was a large man with gentle hands and an encyclopedic knowledge of human technology. "We've modified our quantum drives based on the Cathara specifications. The modifications should allow us to navigate dimensional anomalies, but we've never tested anything like this." Torres studied the fleet formation on her displays. Each ship represented hundreds of trained personnel and years of construction. If the mission failed, humanity would lose a significant portion of its deep space capability. But if they succeeded, they might gain an ally whose technology could advance human civilization by centuries. "All ships, this is Admiral Torres," she announced over the fleet communication channel. "We are about to attempt something that no human has ever done before. We're going to travel through dimensional space to rescue an alien civilization that has been trapped for 3,000 years. The risks are enormous, but so is the potential reward." She paused, looking at the faces of her bridge crew. These were people who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions humanity had to offer. "The Cathara chose to contact us because they believe we have something their advanced civilization lacks. They called us young minds, but I think they meant something more. They meant that we're willing to take risks that older, wiser civilizations would never consider." The fleet began moving toward the coordinates provided by the Cathara signal. As they traveled, Wright continued working with the Cathara technical data, trying to understand technologies that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The alien equations described matter manipulation at the quantum level, energy generation from dimensional friction, and communication methods that bypassed normal spacetime entirely. Commander Park used the travel time to drill her assault teams. The Cathara message had mentioned that their dimensional prison might not be stable enough for large ships. If the rescue required boarding actions or ground operations, Park's Marines would be the first humans to set foot in another dimension. 3 days into the journey, the fleet reached the coordinates. What they found challenged everyone's understanding of reality. "Admiral, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Hayes from the sensor station. Hayes was young and eager, fresh from the academy, but sharp enough to earn a position on the flagship. The main display showed a region of space that seemed to shimmer and twist. Stars appeared and disappeared behind veils of energy that shifted through colors that had no names. Massive structures that might once have been space stations hung broken in the void, their metal surfaces rippling like water. Dr. Wright studied his instruments with growing amazement. "The quantum field readings are off the charts. Space and time are literally unstable here. The Cathara weren't exaggerating about the dimensional barriers failing." Suddenly, alarms began sounding throughout the fleet. Torres felt the deck vibrate beneath her feet as the Resolute's engines worked to maintain position against forces that pulled at the ship from impossible directions. "Contact bearing 037, shouted the tactical officer. "Multiple vessels approaching from inside the dimensional anomaly." Torres watched the display as strange ships emerged from the shimmering distortions. They were beautiful, built from what appeared to be living crystal that pulsed with internal light. The ships moved with fluid grace, their surfaces constantly shifting and reforming. "Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Rebecca Torres of the United Earth Fleet. Please identify yourselves." The response came in perfect English, though the voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. "Admiral Torres, I am Harmony Singer Veltar of the Cathara. We have been monitoring your approach with great anticipation and growing hope." A holographic image materialized on the bridge, showing the first Cathara that human eyes had ever seen. Veltar was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to contain tiny stars and eyes that held depths of ancient wisdom. The alien's form was humanoid but graceful in ways that spoke of evolution on a world with lighter gravity and gentler conditions than Earth. "Harmony Singer Veltar," Torres responded formally. "We received your quantum message and have come to offer assistance. What is your situation?" Veltar's expression showed emotions that translated clearly despite the alien features. Relief, hope, and urgent concern flickered across the Cathara's face. "Admiral, our dimensional barriers are failing faster than we anticipated. We estimate perhaps 18 of your hours before complete collapse. When that happens, the Devourers will be free to enter normal space." Dr. Wright leaned forward. "Can you show us the barrier structures? We might be able to help stabilize them." The hologram shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of the dimensional pocket. Massive geometric structures, each the size of a small moon, hung in impossible space around what appeared to be a complete solar system. but several of the structures showed cracks and distortions, and dark tendrils seemed to be pushing through the gaps. The barriers require constant quantum energy. To maintain stability, Veltar explained. For 3 millennia, we have fed our entire civilization's power output into these structures. But the Devourers have been testing the barriers, probing for weaknesses. Each attack requires more energy to repel. Commander Park studied the tactical implications. How many Cathara are we talking about evacuating? Approximately 12 million beings, distributed across 7 worlds within our dimensional pocket. But Admiral Torres, evacuation may not be possible. Our crystal ships cannot survive in normal space for extended periods. Our technology is adapted to the dimensional environment we have inhabited for so long. Torres felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. 12 million alien beings trapped in a collapsing dimensional pocket, facing an enemy that could potentially destroy all life in the universe. The evacuation ships and temporary habitats that Fleet Command had provided could handle perhaps 100,000 refugees, not millions. Alex Rodriguez had been studying the Cathara technical readouts during the conversation. Admiral, what if we don't evacuate them? What if we help them relocate their entire civilization? All eyes turned to the chief engineer. Rodriguez continued. The Cathara data includes specifications for dimensional engineering on a massive scale. If we could create a new dimensional pocket, one that's stable and defensible, they could move their entire civilization there. Dr. Wright looked skeptical. Alex, the energy requirements for something like that would be enormous. We'd need the power output of multiple stars, or the combined quantum drives of 37 human ships, Rodriguez replied. The Cathara technology describes a process called dimensional anchoring. If we link our ship's quantum fields with their barrier generators, we might be able to create a stable pocket in normal space. Veltar's alien features showed amazement. You would risk your entire fleet for beings you have never met? Torres thought about the question. Human history was full of examples of people risking everything to help strangers. It was part of what made humanity unique among the spacefaring species they had encountered. Other civilizations were cautious, calculating the odds before taking action. Humans had a tendency to act first and worry about the consequences later. Harmony Singer, that's exactly what we're going to do, Torres announced. How do we begin? The next several hours were a frenzy of preparation. Human engineers worked alongside Cathara scientists to adapt their technologies for compatibility. The process required precise coordination between multiple ship systems and alien dimensional generators that operated on principles human science was just beginning to understand. Commander Park took a team aboard one of the Cathara ships to coordinate the operation from inside the dimensional pocket. The experience was unlike anything humans had ever encountered. The Cathara civilization existed in a space where the normal rules didn't apply. Cities floated in mid-air, held aloft by controlled gravity fields. Gardens grew in impossible geometries, with plants that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but signs of the approaching crisis were everywhere. The Cathara moved with the urgency of people who knew their time was running out. Children were evacuated to the most protected areas, while adults worked desperately to maintain the failing barriers. And in the distance, visible through dimensional sensors, dark shapes pressed against the weakening walls. The Devourers, patient but relentless, waited for their chance to break free and resume their consumption of reality. Dr. Wright monitored the quantum field interactions from the Resolute's science station. Admiral, we're seeing massive instabilities in the dimensional matrix. If we're going to attempt this dimensional anchoring procedure, it has to be now. Torres opened a channel to all ships in the fleet. All vessels, prepare for dimensional anchoring. Link your quantum drives to the Cathara barrier network on my command. As the human ships moved into position around the failing dimensional pocket, Torres realized they were about to attempt something that would either save an entire civilization or destroy both the Cathara and the human fleet. But that was what humans did best. Impossible things that nobody else would even attempt. Deathworld tactics. Sergeant Mike Thompson had seen combat on 6 different worlds, from the ice-covered battlefields of Titan to the scorching deserts of Kepler 438b. But nothing had prepared him for fighting inside a pocket dimension where the laws of physics changed depending on which direction you were facing. Thompson was a lean man with sharp eyes and reflexes honed by years of combat. His squad of 12 Marines had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission, establishing a defensive perimeter inside the Cathara dimensional pocket while the dimensional anchoring procedure took place. Dr. Amy Foster, the squad's combat medic and xenobiologist, crouched beside Thompson as they observed the Cathara evacuation efforts. Foster was small but tough, with the kind of quick mind that could analyze alien biology while treating combat wounds under fire. "Sergeant, look at how they move," she whispered. "No defensive instincts at all. They're completely vulnerable." Thompson nodded grimly. The Cathara were elegant and graceful, but they moved through their crystal cities like people who had never known predators. 3,000 years of isolation had bred the aggression out of them. They were pure intellectuals and artists, incapable of the violent thinking that survival sometimes required. "Contact front," called Corporal Maria Santos from her position at the perimeter. Santos had the best eyes in the squad and the steady hands of a born marksman. Multiple signatures approaching from the barrier breach. They don't look friendly. Thompson looked through his scope and felt his blood chill. The Devourers emerged from cracks in the dimensional barriers like living shadows. They had no fixed form, shifting between geometric shapes and writhing masses of darkness that hurt to look at directly. Where they touched the crystal structures of the Cathara cities, matter simply ceased to exist, consumed and converted into more Devourer mass. "All stations, this is Thompson," he reported over the communication link. "Devourers are through the outer barriers. We need immediate support." Admiral Torres's voice came back from the Resolute. "Sergeant, hold your position. The dimensional anchoring is almost complete. We just need a few more minutes." A few more minutes. Thompson had heard that phrase too many times in his military career. It usually meant someone was about to die, buying time for someone else to complete their mission. Today, it meant his squad was about to face an enemy that consumed reality itself. "Marines, establish fire positions," Thompson ordered. "Use the Cathara buildings for cover. Foster, stay with the civilians and keep them moving toward the evacuation zone." The first wave of Devourers flowed through the city like a tide of living darkness. Thompson's Marines opened fire with their plasma rifles, and the energy bolts struck the shadow creatures with bright flashes. But instead of being destroyed, the Devourers absorbed the energy and grew larger. "Conventional weapons aren't working," reported Private Jackson over the squad channel. Jackson was young but steady, with the kind of calm that came from growing up in Earth's Australian outback. "They're feeding on our energy weapons." Dr. Foster had been studying the Cathara technical data during the journey to the dimensional pocket. "Sergeant, try kinetic weapons. Solid projectiles might disrupt their molecular structure." Thompson switched his rifle to armor-piercing rounds and fired at the nearest Devourer. The tungsten bullets tore through the shadow creature, creating holes that didn't heal immediately. "It worked," he shouted. "All Marines, switch to kinetic rounds." But even with effective weapons, the Marines were vastly outnumbered. For every Devourer they destroyed, 3 more emerged from the failing barriers. The creatures seemed to sense that their long imprisonment was ending and pressed their attack with desperate hunger. Harmony singer Veltar appeared beside Thompson, moving with the graceful gliding motion that all Cathara used for locomotion. "Sergeant Thompson, our people are evacuating too slowly." The Devourers are adapting to your weapons faster than we anticipated. Thompson looked at the tactical situation. The Cathara were trying to evacuate in an orderly, civilized manner, forming lines and waiting their turns. It was exactly the wrong approach for a combat situation. Veltar, you need to get your people to move faster. This isn't a drill, it's a running fight. The Cathara's alien features showed confusion. We do not understand. Our society has protocols for evacuation. Procedures. Dr. Foster, who had been helping elderly Cathara reach the evacuation ships, overheard the conversation. Veltar, forget the protocols. In combat, civilization is a luxury you can't afford. You need to think like predators, not prey. Veltar's large eyes widened with something that might have been horror. We cannot. Such thinking is impossible for our species. We evolved beyond the need for aggressive behavior. Thompson felt a moment of understanding. The Cathara hadn't just become peaceful, they had literally evolved past the ability to think tactically about violence. It was why they needed humans, not for their technology or their numbers, but for their willingness to think like killers when the situation demanded it. Foster, take charge of the evacuation, Thompson ordered. Use human evacuation procedures. Get the Cathara moving like their lives depend on it. Foster nodded and began organizing the aliens with the efficiency of someone who had evacuated. Colonies under bombardment. Instead of orderly lines, she created a flowing stream of refugees moving as quickly as possible toward the ships. The Cathara initially resisted the chaotic approach, but as Devourers pressed closer to the evacuation zone, they began to understand the urgency. Meanwhile, Thompson's Marines had fallen back to a secondary defensive position. The Devourers were adapting to kinetic weapons, developing harder surfaces that deflected solid projectiles. Corporal Santos had taken position in a crystal tower, using her sniper rifle to target what appeared to be control nodes in the larger Devourer formations. Sergeant, I'm seeing some kind of coordination between them, Santos reported. They're not just hungry animals, they're tactical. Thompson studied the enemy movement patterns and realized Santos was right. The Devourers were using flanking maneuvers and coordinated attacks. They had intelligence, which made them far more dangerous than simple predators. All Marines fall back to final defensive line, he ordered. We need to buy more time for the evacuation. As his squad moved to their last prepared position, Thompson received an unexpected communication from one of the Cathara scientists. Sergeant Thompson, this is Thought Shaper Kendai. I have been studying your combat methods. I believe I understand something important. Thompson kept his eyes on the advancing Devourers while listening. What is it, Kendai? Your species approaches problems with what you call tactical thinking. You consider multiple variables and adapt your strategies based on changing conditions. This is a concept our people abandoned long ago, but perhaps we can relearn it. Thompson saw where this was going. You want to help us fight? Yes, but not with weapons, with knowledge. The Devourers have a weakness that we discovered but could never exploit. They require dimensional stability to maintain their form. If we could create localized reality distortions, we could disrupt their molecular cohesion. Dr. Foster's voice joined the conversation from the evacuation zone. The medical tricorders are showing massive quantum fluctuations around the Devourers. If we could amplify those fluctuations, it might tear them apart at the subatomic level. Thompson felt the pieces clicking together in his mind. The humans had the tactical thinking and the willingness to take risks. The Cathara had the advanced technology and detailed knowledge of dimensional physics. Together, they might have a chance. Kendai, can you create these reality distortions with your equipment? Yes, but someone would need to operate the dimensional manipulators from extremely close range. The operator would need to approach within a few meters of the Devourers while carrying sensitive equipment. Such a mission would be extremely dangerous. Thompson smiled grimly. Dangerous missions are what humans do best. Foster, get back here. We're going to try something crazy. The plan that emerged was exactly the kind of insane scheme that other species would never attempt. Human Marines would carry Cathara dimensional manipulators into close combat with the Devourers, creating localized reality distortions that would disrupt the creatures' ability to maintain their physical forms. Kendai worked frantically to modify the alien equipment for human use, while Thompson's squad prepared for what might be their final assault. The dimensional manipulators were delicate crystalline devices that required precise calibration and steady hands to operate effectively. "Remember," Foster explained as she checked each Marine's equipment, "these devices will create bubbles of unstable reality around you. Stay calm, keep your movements steady, and whatever you do, don't panic if the laws of physics stop working properly." Private Jackson raised his hand. "Doc, what do you mean by the laws of physics stopping working?" Foster's expression was grim. "Gravity might reverse, time could run backward, colors might become solid objects. Just keep moving toward your targets and trust the equipment." As the final wave of Devourers approached their position, Thompson's Marines activated their dimensional manipulators and charged forward into impossible combat. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Around each Marine, reality became fluid. Thompson found himself running through air that had the consistency of water while his boots left footprints on surfaces that weren't there. Beside him, Corporal Santos was moving in slow motion while her rifle fired bullets that traced geometric patterns in the air. But the dimensional distortions were having the desired effect on the Devourers. The shadow creatures writhed and twisted as their molecular structure became unstable. Where the reality bubbles touched them, parts of their form simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, but deleted from the dimensional matrix entirely. "It's working!" shouted Private Jackson, though his voice came out as musical tones that painted colors in the air. "They can't maintain cohesion in the distorted space." Thompson pressed forward, his dimensional manipulator creating a cone of twisted reality in front of him. Devourers fled from the approaching distortion field, their forms breaking apart as they tried to escape. For the first time since the battle began, the enemy was retreating. Dr. Foster coordinated the assault from her position with the evacuation. Teams. All Marines, maintain formation. Don't let the Devourers regroup outside the distortion fields. The battle became a strange dance of humans moving through impossible space while reality bent around them. Colors became solid obstacles that could be climbed. Gravity pointed in random directions. Time moved at different speeds for each Marine, but their training and determination carried them forward despite the chaos. Harmony. Singer Veltar watched the assault with amazement that bordered on religious awe. Thought Shaper Kendai, observe how they adapt. The reality distortions would drive our people insane with confusion, but the humans simply accept the impossibility and continue their mission. Kendai studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. They are Deathworlders, Veltar. Their planet taught them to survive in constantly changing, hostile conditions. What terrifies us is merely another challenge to overcome. The tide of battle turned as more Marines activated their dimensional manipulators. The Devourers, faced with expanding fields of unstable reality, began a full retreat toward the failing dimensional barriers. But Thompson realized they couldn't. "Let the creatures escape into normal space. All stations, this is Thompson," he reported to Admiral Torres. "The dimensional weapons are working, but we need to pursue the Devourers back to their breach point. If they escape into normal space, they'll be free to attack other worlds." Torres's response came through dimensional static. "Sergeant, the anchoring procedure is 90% complete. Can you hold them for another few minutes?" Thompson looked at his squad. Half of them were moving through reality distortions that would have hospitalized most humans with psychotic breaks. They were fighting an enemy that consumed matter itself, using weapons that turned the laws of physics into suggestions. And they were winning. "Admiral, we're not going to hold them," Thompson replied. "We're going to finish them. The final assault." took place at the dimensional breach itself, where the barriers between realities had worn thin enough for the Devourers to pass through. Thompson's Marines, supported by Cathara scientists operating backup dimensional manipulators, pushed into the breach itself. Inside the dimensional fissure, the battle reached levels of strangeness that human language couldn't adequately describe. Marines fought shadow creatures in a space where up and down were matters of opinion and where thought could become temporarily solid. The Devourers, desperate to escape into normal space, made their final stand in an environment that existed between dimensions. Dr. Foster, monitoring the Marines' biological readings, watched in amazement as human adaptability met its ultimate test. Their stress levels are through the roof, but they're still functioning. Any other species would have had complete psychological breakdowns by now. The breakthrough came when Private Jackson, pursuing a group of Devourers through a section of the breach where time ran backward, realized that the creatures were vulnerable during their transition between dimensional states. Sergeant, they can't maintain their form while crossing dimensional boundaries. If we can trap them in the transition zone, they'll tear themselves apart. Thompson immediately understood. All Marines, drive them toward the dimensional interface. Don't let them complete their crossing. Working together with desperate coordination, the humans herded the remaining Devourers into the unstable zone, between dimensions. Caught between realities, unable to exist fully in either space, the shadow creatures began to unravel at the quantum level. One by one, the Devourers dissolved into harmless energy that dissipated across multiple dimensions. The threat that had imprisoned the Cathara for 3 millennia was finally ending, destroyed by a combination of advanced alien technology and human tactical thinking that refused to accept the impossible. As the last Devourer faded from existence, the dimensional breach began to collapse. Thompson's Marines barely escaped back into the Cathara pocket dimension as the fissure sealed itself permanently. All stations, this is Admiral Torres, came the announcement that everyone had been waiting for. Dimensional anchoring is complete. The new pocket dimension is stable and secure. All Cathara civilians have been successfully evacuated to the new space. Thompson looked around at his squad. They were exhausted, disoriented, and covered in substances that might not technically exist, but they were alive. More importantly, 12 million Cathara beings were safe in their new dimensional home. Harmony singer Veltar approached Thompson as the Marines gathered at the evacuation zone. The alien's expression carried emotions that seemed to transcend species boundaries, gratitude, respect, and something that might have been wonder. Sergeant Thompson, your species has given us something we thought we had lost forever, Veltar said. The ability to fight for what we believe in. We had evolved beyond aggression, but in doing so, we had also evolved beyond the courage to defend ourselves. Thompson removed his helmet and looked at the alien diplomat. Veltar, courage isn't about being aggressive. It's about doing what needs to be done, even when you're scared. Your people have plenty of courage. You just needed to remember how to use it. Dr. Foster joined the conversation, her medical scanner still detecting residual dimensional effects on all the Marines. The real lesson here is that different species have different strengths. The Cathara have technology and knowledge that humanity couldn't develop in 1,000 years. But humans have adaptability and tactical thinking that comes from evolving on a world that tried to kill us every day. Admiral Torres's final transmission came as the human fleet prepared to escort the Cathara to their new dimensional home. All hands, this mission represents first contact with a civilization that's simultaneously more advanced and more vulnerable than humanity. The Cathara have agreed to share their dimensional technology with Earth, while we'll provide tactical and defensive expertise to help them adapt to a universe that isn't always peaceful. As the combined human and Cathara fleets moved through dimensional space toward the new pocket reality, Thompson reflected on what they had accomplished. Humanity had saved an entire civilization, but more importantly, they had proved that being Young and aggressive in a galaxy full of ancient, peaceful species wasn't necessarily a disadvantage. Sometimes the universe needed someone willing to charge into impossible situations with inadequate equipment and stubborn determination. Sometimes it needed Deathworlders who could adapt to reality-bending combat and still remember to help civilians evacuate safely. The Cathara had called humans young minds, and Thompson realized they had meant it as a compliment. Young minds were flexible minds, capable of learning new things and finding solutions that older, more established thinking patterns would never consider. 6 months later, the joint human Cathara research station orbiting Earth would produce technologies that revolutionized both civilizations. Cathara, dimensional science combined with human engineering, created faster-than-light drives that could cross galactic distances in days rather than years. Human tactical thinking, applied to Cathara defensive systems, created shield technologies that could protect entire star systems. But the most important result of the mission wasn't technological. It was the proof that different species could learn from each other, combining their unique strengths to face challenges that neither could handle alone. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers that no single civilization could face. But it was also full of potential allies, waiting for someone brave enough to answer their call for help. And sometimes, the most unlikely species made the best partners for impossible missions. As Sergeant Mike Thompson wrote in his after-action report, mission accomplished. 12 million civilians evacuated. One-dimensional threat eliminated. New allies acquired. Recommendation: approve all future joint operations with Cathara forces. They think like scientists, but they're learning to fight like humans. That's a combination the galaxy needs.